Watching Daybreak here on France 24, the headlines. Repeating their desire to see Palestinians removed from their land, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and US President Donald Trump meet at the White House. They praise each other's actions on bombing Iran, but present no progress for any ceasefire for Gaza. The death toll from flash flooding in Texas rises to over 100 people, with rains continuing to fall on saturated ground now, raising concerns over further dangerous conditions ahead. And a state visit that is seen as a way to reset relations. French President Emmanuel Macron, hosted by King Charles III, as the UK seeks to renew ties severed by its departure from the European Union. No mention of any ceasefire, just self-congratulations over the bombings that they took part in on Iran and a repetition of an idea to move Palestinians out of Gaza. Talks between the US President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that were touted as a chance to push forward for a truce on Gaza show no signs of any advance on that issue, but had Netanyahu once again voicing his support of removing a people from their land.
I think President Trump had a brilliant vision. It's called free choice. You know, if people want to stay, they can stay. But if they want to leave, they should be able to leave. It shouldn't be a prison. It should be an open place and give people a free choice. We're working with the United States very closely about finding countries that will seek to realize what they always say, that they want to give the Palestinians a better future.
And we've had great cooperation from surrounding Israel, surrounding countries, great cooperation from every single one of them. So something good will happen.
Well, meanwhile, Israel's Defense Minister, Israel Katz, has launched a plan to push Palestinians into one area around the ruins of Rafah in the south of Gaza. For more on that, we're joined by our international affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert. Douglas, hearing there from Katz, he's laying out plans for the transfer of much of the population of Gaza into one small area where they will not be allowed leave. I mean, it's sounding very much like ethnic cleansing.
Look, if our viewers are just waking up and having their morning coffee, they might want to put it down because this is a jolting bit of news. I don't see any way else of putting it. Look, the left-leaning Israeli newspaper Haaretz, their headline is, and I'm reading this, Defense Minister, Israeli, says Israel plans to concentrate all of Gaza's population in a, quote, humanitarian zone built on Rafah's ruins. Now, when you see the word concentrate in a headline in an Israeli newspaper, sure, that raises eyebrows and a little more. Obviously, it might be a far-fetched to use the word concentration camp. I'm not going to use that term, but let me tell you what these plans call for, as explicitly laid out by Israel's right-wing defense minister. Israel Katz has instructed Israel's defense forces to bring forward a plan that would involve essentially transferring Gaza's population, remember there's a population estimated at 2.3 million, into a new so-called humanitarian camp, those are his words, to be built upon the ruins of the razed city of Rafah, the southern city in Gaza, Rafah, the southernmost city right along the border with Egypt there. Initially, under this plan, it would involve 600,000 Palestinians moving into this new humanitarian zone city, whatever you want to call it. They would be screened upon entry by Israeli troops around a perimeter at a distance, but around the perimeter of this new zone. They would enter the city. They'd be screened to be de-radicalized, to vet for Hamas militants, making sure they're not entering the area. So moving into this city, once they're there, under the plan, they would presumably not be allowed to leave. Hence this idea and that headline, a concentration. You are literally taking a population into not a very large area, the very southern tip of Gaza, and containing them there, concentrating them there. What would eventually happen, or perhaps the idea, as Katz sees it, is perhaps the entire population. Remember I said there's over 2 million. How would they all fit there? Who knows? But to bring them all into Gaza. Now, what happens then? Is this simply a humanitarian zone where they would live free from any concerns from what else happens in the rest of northern Gaza, which would become perhaps a security cordon, an evacuation zone controlled by Israel? We don't know. But there's the prospect, at least, and this is a policy that is encouraged by a lot in Netanyahu's far-right government, to ultimately encourage, not force, encourage Palestinians to emigrate from Gaza, right? That is, for human rights groups, aid organizations, for a lot of observers, legal experts watching this, when you say encourage Palestinians to emigrate, that amounts to, as they say it, a forcible policy, a coercive policy to force them out of their homeland. That is, to force other countries to take them. This is something explicitly talked about at the dinner between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House last night in Washington. This idea of other countries accepting Palestinians who would move voluntarily for a better future for themselves and their families. That's how the policy is being officially presented. Palestinians, many of them, beg to differ. They see this as a coercive, possibly forced deportation. Legal experts go further. They say this would be fly in the face of all of the international conventions, war crimes, crimes against humanity, simply illegal, this type of thing. But yes, this morning we are talking about a camp to concentrate Gazans in a razed city on the southern tip of Gaza.
Douglas Herbert, thanks a lot for bringing it clearly to us here. Moving on to other news, and the death toll